This is a replay of a conversation I had with Finn Melanson on the Singletrack Podcast earlier this fall. We're in this position of privilege. We must use it.
Yep.
And we must use it to highlight others so that others feel like they belong. And to me, that's what it comes down to. Like, there's no point to having an audience if you can't help with it. Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jon Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspects of running and what helps people to achieve success, however they define it, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. Tracksmith is an independent running brand inspired by a deep love of the sport. When gifting for the runners in your life or for yourself this season, versatility and durability are paramount. For several months, I've been living in my Horizon long sleeve from Tracksmith. This quick-drying poly-cotton blend shirt is a whisper-light part of my wardrobe that I like to wear on its own or layer over base layer in colder temperatures. During the month of December, visit tracksmith.com/FTLR and use code FTLR at checkout for free shipping and to support Bigger Than the Trail. Bigger Than the Trail is a nonprofit organization that is using trail running as a platform to advocate for mental health. This episode is brought to you by Freedom Solar Power, the company I use to go solar on my house. Go solar this year and you'll get to take advantage of the 30%, yep, that's new, federal tax credit next year. It's time to break free from rising electricity costs. When I first started looking into solar, I thought it would be a clunky and expensive process. Going solar isn't as hard as you think it is, and Freedom Solar is a turnkey solution focused on educating the consumer and making sure they have all the information they need to make sure going solar is right for them, both financially and as a way to help the planet. Freedom Solar operates in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, Florida, and now North Carolina too. There are plenty of other great options nationwide. I have a super important question for you. Are you giving your body the nutrients it needs to help bolster and protect your immune system? How do you know? Friends, I'm here to help you eliminate the guesswork with two products that have had a huge impact on keeping me healthy and strong during my training and races that I strongly encourage you to try. Previnex Probiotic and Previnex Immune Health Plus are powerhouse products that can help you perform at your best and keep you healthy, especially as we move into a season where bugs that can take you down are everywhere. Use code FTLR for 15% off your purchase at Previnex.com. That's Previnex.com. Stay tuned after this episode to hear a listener's question answered.
Jon Levitt, it is an absolute pleasure to finally have you on the Singletrack Podcast.
Finn, thank you so much. The screen just showed actual recording is higher quality. So I'm hoping that whatever words come out of my mouth, your programs will run it through their algorithms and make me sound even smarter.
I got to say, I love the reference to Boston. I got to say, so we're recording this on a platform called Riverside, which is super inside baseball to the audience, but it's one of the riskier recording platforms I've ever used. But the promise is you get the local audio file on both ends for supreme sound. And that's what I'm banking on. That's all I care about. So here we are.
Yeah, totally. It's the local recording is a saving grace. The number of times that I've had a guest, like their internet cut out and I couldn't hear what they were saying, but they just kept going. And then the internet came back and you listen to it later and there's no issue because it recorded locally. I was doing an episode with my coach, David Roche. I think it was either episode 69 or 169. I think it was number 69. Anyway, he talked for like 3 minutes and I didn't hear a word of it until afterwards. And he was just talking about training theory. And I didn't have anything to say or add to it. And it was totally fine.
I doubt that there are many listeners in the audience that aren't already familiar with you, and we'll get to introductions in a second, but I was just thinking about this before we hopped on. I'm just generally glad we're doing this, in part because one of my goals over the next 2, 3, 4 months is to develop more relationships in the podcaster space, to knowledge share as much as possible. I think really to be colleagues in a sense, because otherwise, in my experience, it can be a lonely craft. And you've been at this a lot longer than I have. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts there. Like, has that kind of camaraderie been something that's gotten you to this point, like 3 years in as a podcaster?
I just love people, period. The title of what they do or who they are or how they pay their bills is less relevant to me. I think categorically, though, podcasters need to sort of, I don't want to say band together, but agree to some things, to say the least. I've had this conversation with Tina Meir and Matt Chittum separately a handful of times where there are a lot of things that people do well that are sort of intuitive. And then there are a lot of things that people do that are intuitive that are somewhat like damaging to the platform in general. For people that are trying to make it a business or a livelihood, I believe it's important for that goal because people are trying to do this for their livelihood. I'm not one of them. I have a full-time job, and I just love the ability to work with brands that I like, which gives me the ability to say no to brands that I don't like. I still believe there are standards and there are things that people should be doing so that it's not, giving away the farm in exchange for, a pair of socks, as we've talked about.
That's probably one example, but what are some other things on your list that are damaging to the craft?
We're just diving straight on into it, huh?
No, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm Jonathan. I'm a runner and a blah, blah, blah. What are things that people are doing that are that's damaging to the craft? I mean, I don't want to give specific examples because some of it is, I don't want to call people out, right? I don't feel there's anything to be gained from that. I see I'm in a bit of a unique situation where I consider myself a creator, but I'm also on the brand side. And so I know what brands are looking for. I know what's valuable and I know what works. And I've been doing this for my entire career. And so it gives me a little more gravity than the average person on the brand side or the average person on the podcast side. And my dog just saw a squirrel. So, yep, there's the bark. Yeah, we're getting it. Yeah, go get him, Alfie.
Hey, it's a hard life protecting the house.
I know. We must protect this house. This episode's sponsored by Under Armour. Anyway, so brands have a specific reason to work with podcasters. They are looking for ways to communicate with their audience. This is a specific marketing objective. They're not just doing it because they like to be friendly. They're doing it because they have performance metrics that they need to hit, and podcasts are a channel that achieve a business objective. For some brands, it's a very substantial aspect of their business, and for other brands, it's something they're exploring in because everybody else seems to be doing it. So a lot of times there's trade that happens, or there's a payment aspect of it to enter into a more formal relationship. Now, I've been at brands where there has been no budget and we have to rely on in-kind or product trade that down the road, maybe it leads to a paid relationship. That's great. For brands that are a premium price point, you can do trades because, it's not like a $10 consumable that you only might consume once. I see that happening all the time. It's like a product that you might buy twice a year, asking for like 3 Instagram posts and whatnot. And some people would charge $1,000 for that, and others would give it away for free. And so, without going too far or shooting myself in the foot too much, I just believe that there should be some baseline level of integrity or value exchange limitations or agreement that should exist. But this is never going to happen, right? Because everyone is always looking to get noticed or be the next partner or have that breakthrough performance or have that guest that, skyrockets them to the top of the charts, and then blah, 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 blah. So people are always hungry. And in an arena where people are always hungry, they're always going to devalue themselves in exchange for opportunity. I think this is kind of like where you were getting to with the launch of the podcast in general, because you were just frustrated with this like concept for pro athletes. And I am frustrated with this concept for pro athletes who are not getting
too.
For podcasters too. But the both of us are friends with enough pro athletes to know that this is not a problem that's unique to pro athletes. It's creators, pro athletes, podcasts, anyone with an audience, that there's no like set media buy. Like if you're selling digital media through Wall Street Journal or New York Times or whatever, like there's a formula. And if you fall outside the formula, it's called CPM, cost per thousand. And if you fall outside that formula, the answer is no. That doesn't happen in this type of creator relationship. And it's so fascinating because I understand it from both sides, from the brands with no money, the athletes with no money, the brands with money, and the athletes with money. It all makes sense. And it's about the opportunities afforded to people and who can say yes to what and who can say no to what. I can say no to anyone I want because I don't rely on podcasts to pay the bills. And I will eat dinner if I say no to a brand that you say yes to. You might be in the same situation, but I have a full-time job, and the reason I work with brand partners is because I find it fun and I like helping people achieve their goals. Brands have goals. My friends at brands have goals. And I had one other point on that I just like sharing good stuff with people. And I like to have the honesty and integrity to say no to things that I don't feel fit me or fit my audience or allow me to feel good about promoting something where I know that people work hard for their money, and I don't want to tell them to buy things just because like it enables me to put effort into the podcast. And for me, it's more of a metric of how do I allocate my time versus my resource or my dollars.
I got to say one thing before we give you a proper introduction. One of the things that I appreciate about you is, like you said, you're not hungry. You can say no because you have this position outside the podcasting space that gives you that power. It makes me super nervous because I think by the time this episode goes live at the end of September, early October, I think I'll officially be full-time on Singletrack. And hell yeah, yes, I'm super stoked. By all means, super stoked. But I am very concerned about where my mind goes and how strong I stick to my morals and my ethics when it comes to backing products I believe in that are going to ultimately be supporting the show and all these other media efforts. I like to think that I'm going to stand strong and I'm not going to have to make any sacrifices, but what a dilemma, and you really don't know how you are going to respond until you're in it.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I've talked with a lot of people who do podcasts full-time or they are creators full-time, and you sort of have to have this dialogue but internally, like, man, those shoes really suck for me, but they're going to pay me $1,000 for this post, or they're offering a 3-month partnership. And it's so interesting and fascinating to see that intersection of comfort versus integrity versus, your moral compass. Like, there have been brands that have come on to the podcast space very strong. AG1 being one of them. I like their product. I just can't use it. It has B12 that's too high, and I got a skin rash.
Yeah.
But I know they're a sponsor of your podcast, and they're a sponsor of a lot of podcasts, and I really respect them investing $2.5 million a year on the podcast medium. But I had to say no to them because I wasn't comfortable saying this is something I use and this is something you should use too. And it's not, to me, this isn't bad mouthing them. It's not saying that your listeners shouldn't use them. I'm saying it didn't work for me. I can't stand behind it, but there are plenty of other people who love it and promote it, and it works well for them. And there's a ton of science. And so it's that dilemma of, what truly does work for you and what do you want to share with your audience? But if they came back and offered me 5 times what they offered me initially, I'd figure out a way to weave it into my life. No, I'm serious. Like, I would go through the mental gymnastics of, okay, how could I use this? Well, I would use it while traveling, or I would use it while on the road, or like come up with something where it must fit into my life, and then we can talk, kind of a thing. But again, like, where's that threshold where like the seesaw tips in the favor of saying yes? I don't know where it is, because everyone can be bought. Everyone has a price. And where is that line? Most people will never find it.
I don't know why you just made me think of this, but in the same way we just successfully mapped the human genome and we can track everything there, it'd be kind of fun to think about, like, when Athletic Greens came into the podcasting space, what was the first show that they reached? And then how did the influence grow from there? And like, how does that whole sponsorship map out into our space? Like, if somebody could just do that, I think that'd be an absolutely fascinating data visualization to show for.
Yeah, well, the web of outreach would be fascinating. And they have an audio partnerships manager who is I find this so fascinating. They have so many partnerships that they have an audio and a video. I'm sort of assuming if they have an audio, they have a video. But like, it's the same thing with what we've done at Insight Tracker, right? We sponsor 50 plus podcasts, and that's not to say one is better than the other. It's to say, no, this is a real medium from a marketing standpoint. And when I go to races now, people stop me if I'm wearing the Insight Tracker shirt, and they're like, "Hey man, like, thanks for supporting blah, blah, blah podcast." Like, I love listening to them. And to me, what I'm hearing is, thank you for enabling somebody to do something that I enjoy. And that's a win, right? I'll sponsor 100 podcasts, 200 podcasts in that scenario. And I like how, hopefully I have ADHD if you haven't picked up on this. And hopefully our listeners are able to follow the jumping from brand side to personal side to blah, blah, blah. But anyway, the fact that they spent $2.5 million on podcasts is a good thing, right? It means that, and we're going to get into endemic versus non-endemic sponsors, I'm sure. But
definitely
investing that much money into a medium or a channel is a sign that's no longer an experiment. An experiment is $50,000.
Yeah.
So
let's bookmark this because I've been a terrible host and I have totally neglected introducing you. So you are Jon Levitt, and let's dive in with how you got involved at Inside Tracker, which has over the last 8 to 10 years become, without a doubt, a household name in our sport. So take it from there. How'd you get involved?
Sure. So I studied sport management. At first, thank you for having me on the podcast. I've loved seeing what you've been doing and the fact you've put out 100 episodes in this short period of time. 98% of podcasts don't make it past the first 3 episodes, and 57% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Yeah.
So I went to school for sport management and marketing. I interned with the Bruins. That's hockey for all of us runners. The Bruins won the Stanley Cup that year, which was awesome. It's the only year I've ever interned for the Bruins, so correlation is causation. I don't know. But anyway, I decided I didn't want to work for a brand. I got started working at, I had an internship that was at a company that was selling spirulina and chlorella algae, positioned to endurance athletes. We were about 10 years too early. It's huge as an industry. It's huge now, which is cool to see. It's like, oh yeah, I knew about that stuff 15 years ago or 10 years ago. Anyway, I met Inside Tracker at an event in November or October of 2014. Wasn't looking for a job at the time. And the event was called Executive Athletes, put on by Ken Lubin, who hosts his own podcast called Executive Athletes. I was the youngest person in the room by probably 15 years. My dad invited me. He said it was the best $10 he'd ever spent. And I spent, they did a little presentation. And then after that, I was basically interviewed by the CEO and founder. I didn't really know I was being interviewed. And all but got a job offer right there. 2 weeks later, I signed an offer. And that was November of 2014. It's been a fascinating growth since then. We had about eight people when I joined. I now lead welcome to Inside Tracker meetings for more than 8 people at a time. We have like 140 employees now. So it's been fascinating to watch the growth of truly a pre-revenue startup to a company we just closed $50 million last week in Series B financing, which is awesome and gives us, some good runway and ability to do cool stuff with the team we have and with the team we will have. So I've seen the space go from social media is interesting. Oh, podcast, that's kind of a cool thing to think about. To no, this is real. This is a real business. There are a lot of people here, and social media is a must for everyone at this point in the pro athlete space, which I think we should also talk about. I know it's on your list, and the podcast medium has exploded as a gateway to conversation. A much shorter answer to that question is I love helping people, and Inside Tracker is my platform to be able to do that, where I also get healthcare.
Yeah.
and a salary, kind of a deal.
Can you talk about your general interests in social media in the podcasting space and like why you were so interested in carving out your own niche there? And I know I'm asking you a lot of questions here, but like also we talked offline and your boss was incredibly supportive about this early days at Inside Tracker. So I guess take it wherever you want, but
yeah. So I've always found the Northern Arizona elite process of sharing the story to be interesting. Basically, like train hard, take chances, share the whole process. That's sort of an abridged version of it. And there's so much of social media is like a highlight reel, and it always has been. And I really enjoy the people who don't just share success stories, but share the like, I'm in the shit right now and I'm going through it, which isn't to like, some people call that like, I don't know, there's some term for it that involves the word porn. I forget what the word is, but
struggle porn.
Struggle porn, yeah. I think that's very overplayed, and there's plenty of it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like being a real human and showing it on social media. My summer of running this year sucked, and I didn't hide it. And I wasn't like, oh, look at me, I live in Boulder, this is beautiful. I'm like, I can't get any motivation to go out on these beautiful trails. So that's me. That's who I've been. And what I've done for Inside Tracker over the years is basically like meet athletes and work with athletes, and also talk to individuals who are interested in using the program. And I think it's important to mention that it's not it's not just for athletes. It wasn't started to help athletes. It was started to help all humans live a better and more full life through a personalized approach to nutrition. And it evolved from 9-year-old founder. He wasn't 9 when he founded the company, but the idea occurred to him when he was 9. He's like, people die. I don't want to die. I want to live forever. And fast forward 30 plus years, and he's a scientist, and that's his life goal. Anyway, my role has always involved meeting athletes and running with them, eating with them, etc. And I'm a pretty curious person. And so on a run with Zach Miller in May of 2018, we were at the Manitou Incline, and I did one lap, and Zach did his, and then came back and ran the rest of mine with me. Then we ran down the bar trail and got Mexican food. And Zach put on a clinic of eating and ate more in one sitting than I'd seen anyone eat, period. But he was running like 150 to 170 miles at the time. And I was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I love asking why. And he put his fork down and talked for 10 minutes. And so the reason I say he was putting on an eating clinic is because he didn't eat for 10 minutes while he was talking. Anyway, I was like, I'm sitting on gold here. This is fascinating. Like, I must share this information. Fast forward a few months, I'm listening to Billy Yang and Mario Frioli talk about the like birth of podcasting as a medium. And there are so many people who have a podcast now. This is December of 2018. And the line was, iron sharpens iron. We're all better for it, right? You having these great conversations with all these people in the industry and athletes and whatnot, like that makes everyone want to be better, because it's not a competition. It's a rising tide lifts all ships. Let's all be better because we can all be better. And maybe it's a little competition. I don't know. I love it. Anyway, so January of 2019, I'm like, I'm going to start a podcast. And I put out some tweets about this podcast. I go to Flagstaff and I record with a couple of people. I had recorded one episode with a friend, Sarah Duffy, that was released as episode 3. And I'm meeting with Ben Rosario to talk about NAS Elite. And we were talking at a hotel in Flagstaff. I was going to a trail camp there. And he was like, yeah, man, we just like, the team is all about sharing the story, and we just have to be prepared to do articles and interviews and podcasts. And I was like, podcasts? That's my in. So I was like, I got some sticks in my bag here. Want to chat over in that corner? He's like, man, are you serious right now? I was like, yeah. It's like, okay, cool. I didn't want to do anything else this afternoon, so let me make a few calls and we'll do it. And so that was the first like pro recording I did, and the first episode I ever released. The second one was with Ali Kiefer recorded in that same hotel. And again, that was almost 1 million downloads ago, which is so crazy.
Congrats,
and so anyway,
by the way. That's huge.
Thank you. Sometime in mid-October, I believe. So I was reporting to our CEO at the time, and I was a little nervous because I just like did it and I didn't tell anyone. And I was like, I'm just going to do this. And I didn't really know how it would be received. But we have such a strong culture internally of like, everyone is passionate about a lot of things, and it's not all work all the time. Like our CEO volunteers X number of hours a week, and nobody really knows that he does that. Nobody needs to know that he does that. But every Wednesday he's handing out food at his temple, and he's packaging meals. And so like everyone has different things that they do with their life. It's not just about work. So anyway, I started doing this podcast. I put out a few episodes, and at the time we lived in the same neighborhood. So he was driving me home, and we'd have like the best 30 minutes or most productive 30 minutes of my day was like this mentorship that was happening in the car ride home. Anyway, one day he's like, so you started a podcast, huh? I was like, oh God, here it is. And we talked about it. He's like, great. The the stronger your brand grows, the better it is for the company, and vice versa, by the way. So do everything that you need to do to elevate your own brand. And so I took that as like the strongest form of enablement to pursue passions in and outside of work, which makes me want to do more in both arenas, right? The better I am personally, the better it is professionally. The better I am professionally, the better it is personally. And it's such a powerful place to be in. And I acknowledge that it's so unique and such a privilege. And if I don't make something of that extreme privilege, that's an incredible waste of an opportunity. So that's basically how I've seen this whole podcast thing, which has turned into 230 episodes and 960,000 downloads. And like, I employ 4 people. It's crazy.
That's the most interesting part to me. That's super cool. You're creating jobs.
I'm creating jobs. And so one of them, like, she's like, I want to downsize my other clients and do more with you. And the brand's paying me enables that to happen, because I couldn't afford her otherwise. I mean, she's making like a decent wage from what I'm paying her. It's not enough to live on for sure, but she has other clients. But it's the kind of thing that, like, as I scale the podcast, she does more work and I pay her more and I don't do anything more. And so for someone who has, and her name is Emily Holland, she's incredible. If you're thinking of launching a podcast, talk to Emily. Or if you have a podcast, talk to Emily. Anyway, it's pretty scalable because she has somebody under her. And so as her relationships with her clients have grown, she employs more people so that she can do what she's good at. So I said about a year into it, I was like, I want to get to a place where I'm just having conversations. And now I'm at a place where I'm having conversations and uploading them. And that's basically it. And it's incredible because I still have a full-time job and I'm doing less than I ever was with the podcast. And it's providing like monthly pay that's predictable for 4 people, right? One of them is a collegiate athlete, Ruby Wiles. And it's like, it's how she works with a couple of podcasts, but like, it's how she puts food on her table. And it's so cool to be able to do that. And so looping it back to the brand partnership stuff, like this is why it's important to work with brands that you love and then share them with other people, because none of this would be possible without the brands. I wouldn't have the time or the monetary resources to focus on this with this many people at this level if like the Tracksmith relationship hadn't been going on for 18 months and they hadn't seen a X time multiple on their investment, month after month after month after month for 18 months. They're paying these people effectively to put out the conversations that I'm having that tons of people seem to be enjoying. So it's this fun ecosystem where like every person has a role. Whether you're the person listening to it, you don't even ever have to buy anything from the people that you're consuming content from, right? If you rate and review and subscribe and share, like that's gold. Podcasts grow because of that. If you look at the Swap podcast, the number of people that have, first of all, with David and Megan Roche, their podcast is fantastic. And they have a super strong audience that is listening to every episode and they are rating and reviewing and subscribing and doing all these things that make it boost higher and higher and higher on iTunes or Apple's list. And that's why it's grown so much, because it takes incredible content, inspiring hosts, and an audience that believes in the
creators and the
creators. And they have that perfect trio in a way that almost nobody else does, which is so cool to see.
I got to say two things. Number one, I think I've said this on a previous episode before, but David and Megan, obviously like two of the great geniuses in our sport, and somehow they're able to deliver on both quality. The quality in all of the content that they put out is incredible. And the quantity is also amazing. Like, I feel like every single day I'm getting a new Patreon message from David and Megan about like, this like 2,000 word blog post that they put out on training theory. And I'm just like, you kind of have to bow down and just be like, you guys are on another level that I'll never be able to match. And I'm just glad you're invested in our world.
Totally. And it's so interesting when they found out they were having a baby, they were like, we might have to change the way we work because coaching is not infinitely scalable, but a Patreon and a podcast in theory is.
Yeah.
And so newsletter, this kind of stuff, like they can manage a sustainable income without, I stayed at their house in 2019 for 10 days. And they're on from 5 a.m. till 8 p.m. Their routine was wake up, work, eat, run, work, eat, run, work, go to sleep, watch some
Infinite
TV.
game.
Yeah. And that's like, you can't do that if you have a newborn. And so they realized that, and they're like, we need to figure out a different model so that we can actually like continue to buy Addie all of the toys and stuff that she desires.
It reminds me, I got to interject. There's this great quote that I actually just put in the newsletter yesterday, and I'm going to read it off. It's a quote. It's a beautiful day to start working on something that keeps working after you stop working. Totally.
Yes.
And I think that just fits what they do or what they're transitioning to perfectly.
Yeah. Passive income is wealth. Passive income is the goal. And I think that all of us should aspire to be rich with our time and have as much free time or as much time to spend with our friends and family as possible. And so sort of everything I do is in the pursuit of financial freedom. Mm-hmm. And that's a way to do it.
I got to tell you one story that's just coming to mind because I think, you talked about how you were already having all of these off the record conversations with fascinating industry people, and it was just time to bring them on the record. There's this story about this BBQ down in the great state of Texas, and it always had these massive lines out the door. And those potential customers were getting frustrated because it was taking a long time to get seated. And the head cook at the restaurant had all these pieces of the meat. They're now called burnt ends. And he's like, I have an idea. Let's take this tray of burnt ends and let's bring them out to the people in the line waiting outside the door, and we'll feed them those burnt ends while they're waiting for a seat. Lo and behold, it became the most popular thing on the menu. So that A, but B, they just recycled something that they were going to throw away or not deliver value on and bring it to these customers. And I feel like that's what you've done with the podcast.
Burnt ends are like $25 a pound, and they're delicious.
Right. And so this is burnt ends, but for conversations in the running industry.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. I just need to rename the podcast Burnt Ends.
Okay, one more question before we kind of start talking about like state of podcast, state of sponsorship, stuff like that. When you think about putting a podcast together and you think about the guests that you want to have on and the way that you want to structure conversations, generally speaking, like what's your method? What's your style?
I don't have one. Honestly, it's embarrassing. But I think that's like, I've never had an agenda. I truly just want to have conversations with people who society might deem as conventionally successful and understand why they're successful and what we can learn from them. And so the framework of all of my podcast episodes, I'd say after episode 55 or 60, maybe 40, is with that framework, right? Who are you? What makes you really excited? And what can these several thousand people, or what can one person learn from you? So often people ask like, oh, what are we going to talk about? And my answer is, well, I'll ask you who you are and we'll talk about success, growth, failure, and what makes you happy. You could get someone to talk for 10 hours about that kind of stuff, because it doesn't really matter the details. It's how you deliver it and how, like, what are the takeaways. So in terms of guest curation, I'm not great at this either. I just sort of talk to whoever I'm interested in or who has reached out recently. I was on like a streak of saying yes to literally everyone who asked to be on the podcast, and it's good and bad, right? I've had a lot of feedback that people want to hear more like mid to back of the pack conversations, which is great. And I also think that there's a little bit of earned. I don't know what I'm trying to. I know what I'm trying to say. I don't know how to say it. Like implicit knowledge from an Olympian, right? But what I've learned is that's not always true. There's some really boring, conventionally successful people. I haven't talked to a lot of them, but I've talked to enough of them to know that they exist. But what I find so interesting, I reference Gwen Jorgensen all the time. I've become pretty good friends with her. She's an Olympic gold medalist, and she won something that she had aspired to win for her entire life. I don't really care about her winning Olympic gold in Rio in 2016. I care about what did she do the next day and the next day and the next day and today and tomorrow and the next day, because that's the human experience that people can learn from. Very few people are ever going to be at you're so rarely going to be at your own personal best, let alone like a world best. So I don't think it's useful to aspire to be like that. I think it's useful it is useful to learn what people do along the journey of becoming excellent. Well, 230 episodes in, spoiler alert, the takeaway is just be consistent.
Yeah.
That's it. Be consistent, have community around you, and draw or establish a version of success that's entirely within your control, and you win, right? That's pretty much the secret. If I asked what does success mean to you to enough people who have answered in a subjective manner, to basically categorically say the people who create their own definition of success that is entirely subjective are the ones that are conventionally the most successful, and they're usually the happiest. And most importantly, when things aren't going well, they pull on gratitude and joy and love of the process.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for my shitty summer because it forced me to like live that. And I got through that from 200 conversations I've had with excellent people, conversations with David, conversations with friends and family around, but mostly the podcast and what I've learned from the podcast. And gratitude is a huge aspect of your ability to be successful and navigate tough moments. People listening are probably like, oh yeah, but like, how can you be happy all the time? Or how can you be grateful all the time? It's like, it's not really it. It's in the weeds. Sometimes you just sit in the suck, and it can't be joyful all the time unless you're on drugs, right? Like you cannot alter your biochemistry to be happy all the time. It's not possible. And so many people on social media are like, happy all the time. Yes, they're lying. You can be like really joyful a lot of the time, but I don't believe that. Anyway, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But that's been my takeaway, which isn't what you asked, but well, that's what you get.
But you said a lot of interesting stuff there. And one thing I want to zero in on is, as you've produced 200 plus episodes over the last 3-4 years, and you've built up a pretty massive audience, you're starting to probably get a lot more suggestions and recommendations about the type of content that you should be outputting. And there's this, I used to work in politics, and there's this famous concept of like for elected officials, you're either a delegate or a trustee. And the delegate is the person who always has their constituents like in their ear and they're just taking orders, versus the trustee who has been voted in and like they can just do as they wish. And the audience will just kind of like trust that they're going to go in the right direction. Do you feel like you can just like trust your intuition, trust your gut about what's going to be good, and you're going to produce those episodes? Or do you feel like there is some pressure to give in to your audience from time to time?
I feel like I'm more on the side of the trustee where I'm just going to trust my gut, right? Like I don't need this. And that's so freeing. And I can do whatever I want. When the social justice movement of June 2020 kicked off in earnest, I said whatever the hell I wanted to say and felt great about that. I didn't care who I pissed off or rubbed the wrong way, because my own personal integrity and making people feel like they belong, or helping people to feel like they belong, and exposing my audience to a diverse group of guests so that Black, white, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, anyone, different body sizes, different abilities of amputee runners, anyone. Like, I don't really care if it hurts my numbers, if it's not like a conventionally successful or attractive or whatever guest. I'm more interested in curating real people. And I did get a lot of feedback on that, mostly favorable. I do also want to talk about being a male podcaster versus being a female podcaster, or just being a male.
Let's do it.
In this space in general, because I don't know if you read Zoe Rome's
I did.
piece for Relay this morning, where she talked about her relationship with social media and her body, and being an athlete and using her body for, posting bikini shots and whatnot. I think the world is a very challenging place for women.
Yes.
And I can't even imagine the difficulty of being so public. I'm good friends with Amelia Boone, and she tells me all the time about, like, she has 100,000 followers and she gets so much like weird feedback on her experiences and whatnot. And I barely get anything. I barely get, like, the worst I get is, I come here for nutrition talk and you tell me that non-binary people deserve a place in the world.
Yeah.
Like, of course they do.
Yeah.
What are you kidding me? This is insane. But that's as far as it goes. It's not a personal attack on me or my body or anything like that, which, again, we're in this position of privilege. We must use it.
Yep.
And we must use it to highlight others so that others feel like they belong. And to me, that's what it comes down to. Like, there's no point to having an audience if you can't help with it. The last conversation I ever had with my grandfather, I think we talked about this. I mentioned it on a bunch of podcasts, my own and others at this point, but he basically said that the whole point of life is to leave the world a better place than when you entered it. So every single time I have this conversation, or every single time I am able to do something that helps one person, like, to me, that feels like living life. And that's the point of living life. Everyone just wants to feel like they belong. And when I had a conversation with Rajpal Panu, an Indian American ultra runner who focuses on road ultras, crazy. Anyway, he said, I'm often the only brown person on the starting line. And I want to do well so that other people can see me, other Indians or American Indians, Indian Americans can see that they can do this too. Yeah. And that's the feedback that I want to hear. I don't really care about the criticism. Don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from, is basically how I live my life on the internet. If you're not going to listen to someone's guidance and they haven't built up enough respect from you for that, don't listen to their criticism.
let's talk about the state of running podcasts. Like, there's a lot of things that I think about on a daily basis, and we've seen it hashed out on Twitter. People are concerned about, like, our podcast too saturated? Is there too much repetitiveness in the running podcast world? So do you share any of those concerns? Before we talk about optimism, do you share any of those concerns about, like, the direction that our particular world of podcasts is headed in?
No. You want me to say more?
Please.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ears to listen to these episodes, and it's not something I concern myself with. If someone wants to create a podcast and carve out a niche, great, go for it. I don't think it's eating up a bandwidth of others. What it may be doing is eating bandwidth of sponsors, which is why I'm so invested, pun intended, in non-endemic sponsors, and I'm so interested in who else can we bring into the space versus and make it a bigger pond to swim in versus like carving out lanes in the pond and making swim lanes. I think the growth of the number of podcasts is kind of funny, right? Like the joke is like, oh, everybody has a podcast now, but it's basically true. Between being a podcast, having a podcast and a newsletter. But if you think about it, like, it's just because people are passionate about things, and that's a good thing. And it's good. It's a good thing that people are so passionate about things that unite them. I know so many coaches who have a podcast as a way to disseminate information to their athletes. Andrew Simmons, lifelong athlete or defining endurance, based in Golden, Colorado. He's got a couple hundred people to listen to his episodes, and he told me that he has so many athletes he works with that he doesn't have time to like explain energy metabolism for the umpteenth time, but refer back to episode 16 or whatever it is, and you can hear him talking to his athletes about a specific topic. That's great. There are plenty of coaches that are doing this, and they have 25 listeners, and it's like there are 17 athletes and somebody's parents. Who cares? There are going to be a bunch of larger ones that sort of drift to the top, and that's how natural selection works. It's like if it's intended to grow, and you put effort into growing it, and the content is good, and you're invested in making it successful, or whatever you define success as, and you understand algorithms, then it will grow. Like, I need to be on YouTube. I think like investing time and resources into YouTube, which is the second largest search engine in the world. You may have told me that. That's a way to like actually grow. And so the more enthusiast or hobby podcasters aren't going to be investing their time and effort into putting up a YouTube that like 3 people will see. But somebody who already has 4,000 or 5,000 listens per episode is recording video or doing live episodes in person, where you can just like set up a camera. Why would you not be on YouTube if you're intending to grow? Again, I'm not doing it currently, but I can just turn the dial up with Emily and send her more content, and boom, all of a sudden we're on YouTube.
I couldn't agree more. I want everyone to start a podcast. I want everyone to start a YouTube. I read this somewhere, or maybe I heard it somewhere. A lot of people deal with writer's block, so I can totally see why writing out these Instagram descriptions and blog posts and all that kind of stuff can be intimidating and daunting. Far less people have talker's block. And I think as soon as you get a microphone in front of somebody and you're prompted with certain things to think about, a lot of interesting stuff by and large tends to come out. And I want to see just more athletes do it. I think that maybe it might have been Mike Cafuzzi, who you had on the show a couple of weeks back. Like, he reposted something on Twitter like, "Hey, runners, are you concerned or intimidated about making content? There's this one Japanese runner that just has a photo of him running in silence for 20 minutes. Like, don't overthink it. It has 100,000 views."
It has like 100,000 views. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I want to, like you said, I want to see more athletes doing it. Grayson Murphy and I were talking about this. I know you're friends with her as well, and she straddles the line between like influencer, I hate that word, and creator and athlete. And she's someone who, even as an athlete, has taken a lot of criticism because she straddles road and trail, or track and trail. Like, how dare she? No, it's freaking awesome. And her ability to just say, I'm going to do what makes me happy. We did an episode in December of 2019, and I titled it Follow Your Arrow. Like the song Follow Your Arrow Wherever It Points. I love that. I love country music, and that was a very appropriate one for that one. Anyway, she's so good at storytelling, and talk about a way to add value to a relationship with a brand. We work with her at Inside Tracker, and we have for 2+ years, formally and informally prior to that. And her ability to connect with her audience allows us to pay her because she's driving like actual interest and conversion on our end. And so here's this feedback loop of, well, we have a creator relationship with her where it's not predicated on race results, which I love. And maybe one day we'll do bonuses or whatever, but we can talk about that too. But it's focused on, okay, here are X deliverables, and you can predict this for the next 6 to 9 to 12 months. And if you go get pregnant, totally fine. Actually, great. Now you're more relatable. This kind of a thing where it allows for the connection. And the more that people can connect, everyone's craving connection. COVID taught us this. Everyone wants to be connected to people. And everybody is so hyper connected, but we're less connected than ever before because everybody's so hyper connected that you're never paying attention to it. And when I first started podcasting, I did every single episode in person, face to face, 2 feet away, 3 feet away, whatever. Our phones were on airplane mode for an hour. All you could do was talk to the person in front of you. When was the last time you did that in real life?
Oh, man. Months at least.
Yeah, exactly. And so people crave it, and I was craving it, which is one of the reasons I started a podcast. And it's one of the reasons why when the pandemic started, I started putting out 2 a week, because I was having so many conversations while stuck in my 4th floor apartment that I needed those conversations quite literally to like keep my sanity and stay alive. And so the ability to, even these people that do the like, they just do it themselves and they just talk for 45 minutes. Or they have a co-host, and the co-hosts and the host talk for an hour or whatever. Like, you're letting people into your life and telling these stories that make you so human. I can't tell you the number of people that have like reached out and they're like, I feel like I know your whole life story. And you're the host.
Yeah.
You're not even the one being asked the questions. And so you talk about format of the episode. I get the funniest feedback I get, or criticism I get on the podcast. Every so often I look at the reviews, and if you're of the type who likes to review, please go review Finn's podcast because it's awesome and helps it grow. But finish this episode first. The feedback is references the same stories, or like this thing with my grandfather, or running rim to rim to rim, or my PR marathon in 2019. And I use these stories of these like epic things that I do to connect with the guest. And I often forget that like the same person has listened to all 200 plus episodes, and the guest might not be a listener. And so it's like this balance of like, I just have to do epic things all the time to be relatable to my guests, with like, okay, pick a different takeaway from, the 17th time you've told the Picky Bars story at the Grand Canyon.
I got to say that actually, and I don't know, well, you've inspired me to think about this, but I've had similar criticisms. A lot of people probably rightfully criticize me for a lot of verbal tics that I have in shows. And I think everything is fascinating, which is true. I really do. But I do think that when you are on the hook in public to create content and to have conversations and to recruit guests, it does inspire you to try to do more quote unquote interesting things in real life. Like there are things I'm motivated to do from like a running standpoint, or to go see a certain movie, or to watch a TV show, or to read a book, just to broaden my experience. So I kind of like the forcing function there.
Yeah, I love it.
But anyways, this is a little bit of a different direction, but you mentioned the term non-endemic when we were talking about sponsorships earlier. And this is kind of where I want to take the conversation here. We were talking offline maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago about how we think that the entrance of quote unquote non-endemic sponsors into the sport could be one of the next great growth opportunities for athletes, podcasters, creators, et cetera. Maybe talk about why you're so bullish about this, and when you think about it, how you compare it to the status quo.
So I'm personally fascinated by the sales process, and I really like the chase. And this is why I enjoy pursuing sponsorship, but not executing on sponsorship, which is why I've hired a team to execute on sponsorship. So it's become, I don't want to say easy, because that's like whatever. It's been accessible to get sponsors that have running shoes or running apparel or shirts or whatever. And as someone who doesn't do this full time and doesn't depend on it, sometimes I have a little guilt around having their dollars flow to me. So I like to be creative and I like to think outside the box. Who else can I work with? Who else can I bring into the space? And I really like being the first and then able to connect and like be the proof of concept. So long story short, I got my solar company to sponsor the podcast, and I've now paid off my solar thanks to 9 months or 10 months of sponsorship from them, plus the federal tax credit, which is 30%, which is insane. So our initial conversation was, hey, you guys have a product that is good for the earth, saves money, and helps people who like to be outdoors, helps preserve the outdoors for people who like to be outdoors. So who is in theory the perfect candidate to buy solar? A trail runner. So long story short, they agreed. And now we're telling that story because I was so frustrated that the process of buying solar was so simple and so like economically viable for anyone with a roof that is suitable. So much so that like I could have chosen financing and started saving $40 a month every month from day 1 through year 25. And then after that, it's totally free. Or I could buy it, get the 30, at the time it was 26% federal credit, buy it, save a bunch of money from paying, and then it adds some multiplier on the value of your home without being an additional. Long story short, I saw an opportunity to take advantage of being the first to explain something to a community where I thought it would relate to.
Yeah.
Well, it's worked, and half dozen people have signed up for solar, which was so successful for them that, right, because it's a very considered purchase where the average purchase is $27,000. So 6 people buying a pair of shoes is totally insignificant, but 6 people buying a $30,000 system is pretty substantial. And so it was so successful that they basically added more resources on their side to manage this relationship, and they want to do more with it. And so I said, look, I'm not unique. I'm just talking to the right people in the right way that I think that I should communicate with them out of frustration that nobody has done this yet. This is going to work. And then I'm going to introduce you to a bunch of my friends and publishers and creators, and you're going to connect with them. And then trail running will be 10% of your business next year, which is $10 million, which is like not out of the realm of possibility when we've already done 200K from it. So I see something like that, and the company is Freedom Solar. Their CEO and I did a podcast on which was released on Earth Day. He's a mountain biker. He did Leadville 100 this year. Fascinating guy. Absolutely focused on alcohol recovery, being in recovery from alcoholism, and everything else that comes before everything else. Even before family, even before, because if he doesn't have his sobriety, he doesn't have anything else. And so I found it so fascinating that here's a guy who was so vulnerable about his human experience, and he's also the CEO of a $100 million company who's doing great things in the world. And they were willing to take a chance on some guy that showed up at their office the weekend of a bachelor party, and here we are, bringing solar to the masses. But what I find this to be exciting is because their investment into me, which was a success, will hopefully lead to investment into others,
trickle down,
which will the trickle down, which will hopefully lead to A, more people going solar, B, better environmental impact, C, saving a bunch of money, and D, support for many more creators and publishers. So it's this like perfect ecosystem where the more successful it is, the better it is for consumer, brand, creator. And I like these scenarios where I call it 1 + 1 = 3. This is 1 + 1 + 1 = 5.
Yeah.
Where everybody wins and then some. And so it's like personally fulfilling, but also like really enjoyable to chase these opportunities. And then my amazing team helps to actually execute on like making it successful. And then people are putting solar in their house, or they're like finding that's a bit of an extenuating circumstance, but like even athletic brewing getting into the running space. Beer is not a endemic sponsor to running as much as runners love to drink. But here's a company who is the #1 craft brewer in America, alcohol or non-alcoholic beers, investing tons into races. Dunkin' Donuts has been pursuing, or Molly Seidel has been pursuing Dunkin' Donuts for the longest time. Kind of hard to quantify the sponsorship on something like that, where there are 1,000 Dunkin' Donuts. I think it's 1,004 nationwide. And for them, it's just a media buy, an association with somebody that people love. But that's another example of like, okay, it's a bit tangential to running in that America runs on Dunkin's, runners run on coffee. Like I think we both. Are you working with Long Run Coffee as well?
I'm not, but I'm really excited by their founder. I appreciate the strategy he's laid out, and I truly think it's good for athletes and creators like yourself, anybody involved.
So Long Run Coffee is a coffee with electrolytes, and they basically reached out to a handful of creators and offered to co-brand a line of coffee where the person whose brand was being leveraged received some percentage of the sale. And that's that. And you can push it however much you want. And if nobody buys, you don't get any money. And if people buy, the brand gets money and you get money. And so it's just like, it's this interesting platform where, again, you don't need coffee to run. It's not a shoe. It's not a sports bra. It's not a watch. You don't need a watch to run either. But it definitely helps. Yeah. Both the watch and the coffee.
And by the way, just for anybody that is out there and they're confused because we're throwing around the terms endemic and non-endemic, as Jon's already explained, endemic is like any brands that are native to the space. They belong very neatly in the space. So like your running shoe brands, your watches, your gear companies, and then non-endemic is any brands that you wouldn't naturally think are involved in running, but they do ultimately fit in some capacity. So like it could be like a mattress company, or as you mentioned, a solar company. But it takes some pushing and prodding and case studies to show that there's ROI if they invest.
Totally. And there are so many mattress companies getting into the space as well. And then there are pillow companies. There's a company called Lagoon Sleep, and their founder is friends with Corey McGee's boyfriend. And that was their entry point into running. And so I chatted with them a while back. They sent me some pillows, and they're great. And they're like, their whole premise was, you spend so much time and money thinking about your bed and your bed frame, and then you buy like a $10 pillow from Walmart, but your face goes on your pillow and your neck lies on your pillow. Why would you not think about like the last mile? And so they've popped up, and now they're partnering with and sponsoring athletes. And so whereas previously those athletes, and they're sponsoring a lot of collegiate athletes, which is super cool because most collegiate athletes are poor. And I'm just referring to my own experience. Anyway, then those are people that previously were reliant on performance-based contracts and forced racing and the need to perform, otherwise they can't eat, kind of a deal, or say yes to partnerships that that they don't believe wholeheartedly in. And now they're starting to have this plethora of options to choose from, and it's truly like a gear check of like, what's present in your life that you just want to share with other people. And for people with a platform, it's the ability to then work with that company and open the aperture and open it up to seeing if you can be a partner of theirs and help them achieve, when it comes down to it, brass tacks of conversion and awareness and association. If you've been enjoying this podcast and can spare 90 seconds of your time today, can you do me a favor? Can you pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review? It helps other people find and enjoy the podcast too. Thanks so much. Thanks again to Tracksmith for supporting For the Long Run and their continued support of not just this podcast, but the running community in general. Tracksmith is an independent running brand inspired by a deep love of the sport. They've been supporting this podcast since the fall of 2021, and I am so grateful for their help in making this pod possible. They've been able to continue to sponsor the show because listeners like you have been using my code, which is FTLR, and gets you free shipping and a 5% donation to Bigger Than the Trail, which is a nonprofit organization using trail running as a platform to advocate for mental health. If you're looking for a non-monetary way to support the pod, consider leaving a review. It helps more people find it. Thanks again to Freedom Solar for supporting this episode of the podcast, as well as our desire for a greener energy source. The buying process was fascinating and so eye-opening, most notably how simple and cost-effective it can be. I'm excited to pay my learnings forward. If you're curious, message me on Instagram or Twitter, and I'd be happy to help you get in contact with some great resources or even just answer some questions. Freedom Solar is a full-service solar company installing solar panels and backup power systems since 2007. They operate in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, Florida, and now North Carolina too. My parents have the same panels from a different company in Massachusetts. More than a few friends and podcast listeners have already gone solar, and they're all so excited and happy with the process with Freedom Solar so far. I got to talk about this last season of training for a second. So while training for a CIM, I've hit the highest weekly mileage I've ever hit and highest monthly mileage I've ever hit. What's really cool about that is I feel awesome. I feel like I can just keep running and running and running, and I also have the energy for everything else in life. I haven't gotten sick, even despite those around me getting sick, not even the sniffles for me. And I obviously can't pin this on a single thing, but I've been really diligent about taking Previnex's Immune Health Plus and probiotic incredibly diligently. I've been taking that every single day since March, and it's helping. So I encourage you to check it out and use code FTLR at checkout for 15% off at Previnex.com.
All right, we're actually resuming this conversation after a totally unintended 24-hour break. That's my fault. But picking up where we left off, Jonathan was just talking about the importance of bringing non-endemic brands into the world of podcasting and athletics and event sponsorship as it pertains to the running world. And he had just gone into detail about his own experience working with Freedom Solar and A, Jon, it's great to have you back on the podcast. And B, I think the next direction I want to take this whole theme of endemic versus non-endemic to is just like generally, who is this helping, and why does it help our sport?
Well, Finn, thanks for having me back on the podcast. It's been so long since we last caught up. Who is this helping? This is helping everyone, right? I've been running a lot with Kara Goucher here in Boulder, and every run flies by and is over immediately because we just chat the whole time. And so coincidentally today we were talking about media and sponsorship and non-endemic sponsors, and she was talking about how when she signed her first contract, how different the world was compared to how things are now, where it was all about performance. And if you weren't performing, you were cut, and that was that. And today, it's so much more around storytelling, and it's so much more around the whole athlete. So who is this helping? Both the non-endemic sponsors coming into the space and the shift in desired outcomes from brands. Well, it's helping everyone who isn't at the top of the podium all the time, and that's that. Like, yeah. The only people who stand to gain from the setup that it has been previously are people who are winning all the time, who don't desire to share their story. And there's a lot of discourse and dialogue on social media about like the tides are changing, people are frustrated, whatever it is, things have changed. And you can wallow in the like, it used to be all about performance, or you can realize that this shift to storytelling enables more brands to stay in the space and bring money into the space, right? Like this deal that I have with Freedom Solar, like I want to get them to spend $250,000 in running next year. And I've brought them almost that from referrals this year. And so it's not a far stretch to think that a brand like that, I mean, for them, it's like a little bit like cheating because the ticket is so high, but their margins aren't great. So it is expensive, and they're not making a lot of money on each thing. There's like 18 people involved in every install. Anyway, what it means is we say a rising tide lifts all ships, right? We want more money pouring into the sport because this means more opportunity. It means that women who get pregnant can retain contracts because they are most relatable in this state. It means that someone who isn't performing but is really good at telling the story of like living in the suck temporarily, and here's what I'm going to do to push through and keep showing up, and like these people aren't going to go hungry, and they're not going to leave the sport because they can't afford to stay in the sport. They're able to work with brands and partners, or they would be able to work with brands and partners who collectively enable them to pay their bills, right? Like not everyone's being signed by Nike, not everyone's being signed by Adidas, etc. But some people are. But what I'm getting at is that collectively, athletes no longer need to rely, or at some point in the future, it's definitely trending this way. Athletes will not need to rely solely on their shoe sponsor to pay their bills. That being said, there are some people who are getting paid from shoe sponsors, and that's great for them. And they're doing the storytelling, they're doing the performance, and someone at these brands has decided that they're worth six figures. And that's incredible, right? Like the whole goal of this is 1 + 1 = 3. A lot of brands who focus on conversion, and it's really easy for those who only sell online, they're focused on, if we send out $1, we need at least 25 to 50 cents coming back to us in the first 30 days. Now, it's really hard for a shoe company or a sports nutrition company who's sold in running retailers to quantify the impact of sponsorship like that. But that's when we look at like traditional awareness versus conversion.
Let me ask you this one sec. I want to ask you this because you have a sales mind. You're incredibly business savvy. You're good at this. Like it takes someone like you to bring in a relatively novel sponsor to the space. But like, if I'm an athlete listening to this conversation between you and I, how do I identify and form relationships with these types of companies that aren't the Nikes, the Patagonias, the North Faces, where it's already a very natural conversation? Do you think that there is a way for athletes to start that, or are they more reliant on people like you who take care of that first difficult conversation, and then now that they're established, it's a much easier in for them?
I love this question, right? It's such an easy answer. Look at yourself. Look at what's in your refrigerator. Look at what's in your bedroom. Look at what's in your living room. Look at the brands that you purchase or you have purchased, and reach out to them and send 20 messages a month, or send 10 messages, or send 5 messages, and be prepared for 90% of them to say, hey, that's not interesting. It's interesting, but it's not something we do. Most of them probably won't even reply, but all it takes is 1 or 2. Again, pillows, cherry juice, tables, air purifiers, dog treats, recovery tools, notebooks, sunglasses,
headphones.
Like, literally everything is up for grabs in this conversation. And I mean, look at someone like Ford. Ford is doing it. Ford is lending cars.
Corey Woltering.
Yeah. Myrna Valerio. The winter is coming. Ski brands. Rossignol is big on PR and this and that. Like, literally everything is fair game, is what I'm saying. The whole point of the last 75 minutes is if you're an athlete with an audience, every single thing has the potential to help you, right? You've purchased all of these things, and in theory, this company probably wants more people to purchase these things. You can help. And so that's where it becomes the authentic, these are things that work in my life. And this is where relationships are best, because it's not a stretch. It's not being pitched by a brand with a nice price tag and trying to figure out how to make it work in your life. It's, here's something I've been using for 10 years. And some people are good at social. Some people can just weave in things that shows how they go about their life. But at some point, like, if you've engaged with your audience and been a real person to your audience, and you're a professional athlete, like, people just want to support you. And so simply just sharing things that are enabling support of you will work, right? Like, we see all these membership or subscription models popping up, and people do it for, I'm seeing it now just for Instagram. You can send somebody $5 a month. Yeah. Grayson Murphy is doing this now to bring her up again. And it's just like, people love people. And yes, people work hard for their money, but if 100 people give $5 a month or $2 a month, that's a little more than paying for your, coffee habit. That's starting to help pay for your food bill. And so I guess the takeaway from this ramble is, look at what is in your life that you've purchased and would want to support, and then ask for help. Ask people. People want to support good people. And social media enables this to occur. I don't have any advice for people who don't use social media or whatnot, but email was the big thing. Then it went away, and now it's the big thing. It will always be the big thing. So don't rely on social as like the end all be all for revenue generation. If you're an athlete listening to this, you have to own your list. So social media, you're just renting space. Instagram could go down. It could be bought by Russian bots. Elon Musk I saw his $44 billion purchase went through today. Like, he could shut down the whole platform, and then your huge audience on there is completely worthless. You don't own any of that space, and we need to acknowledge that. Yep. And if the product is free, you are the product, so you don't have any control in that situation. But yeah, I like how you asked that question, and it lends to, like, anyone can be creative. Anyone can reach out to a brand, and somebody on the other side figure out what their job is and figure out what you can do to help, and literally ask this. Say, hey, I'm interested in working with your brand. What can I do to help? How can I help you reach your goals? The Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People principle, like, what matters to people? Figure out what matters to them. In a business setting, everyone has KPIs, key performance indicators. Like, understand what someone else is tasked with doing. And if you can help them do that, they'll do anything within reason. And so that's where I go with these conversations. Every time it's speaking with a brand, it's like, what are you focused on and how can I help with that? Here's what's available. Here's what I can do. You tell me the next step and let's dance.
I got to comment on one thing you said a little ways back, and it's about rejection. I don't know about you, but on a day-to-day basis for me, running this podcast, but also even just in the sales-y jobs I've had in my life, I've dealt with overwhelming amounts of rejection. And in my experience, that's a feature, not a bug. And I think if I have a list of like 100 potential sponsors of the pod, for example, 85 won't even respond to me. 10 will be like, F you. 5 will be like, not interested. 3 will be like, let's book a meeting. And of that 3, like 1 will be like, yeah, where do I sign the contract? So maybe talk about that in your experience in that realm of like prospecting for guests and sponsors and stuff like that. Because I think a lot of athletes in our sport, for example, don't appreciate that it's okay that you're going to go through quite a struggle before you get yeses.
So it's a great question. And I think a lot of people don't realize this, there's an entire job function, which is called business development. And you're deemed a success if your failure rate is like 90%. Yeah. That's fantastic.
It's like batting average in baseball, right? Like 7 out of 10 times you strike out, you're still an all-star.
Exactly. If your batting average as an athlete pitching brands is 300, you're a hero. I want to meet you and shake your hand and take you to dinner. The reality is it takes a lot of time, and things that you can do to maximize efficiency will help. So you should have a pitch deck. You should have or even just a one pager of like who you are, what you care about, and some stats, and what you focus on. And then like a single paragraph pre-written per type of brand, right? If you're reaching out to a bunch of shoe companies, you're going to say similar things. If you're reaching out to a bunch of mattress companies, you're going to say similar things, but different than the shoe companies. So anything you can do to maximize efficiency so that you're not doing the work 100 times, you're doing the work 5 times, and then adjusting and personalizing for an individual brand. Use a name, use a brand, some feature of the product that you like, but it has to be actually personalized. It can't just be like, I'm interested in your shoe brand.
Yeah.
But the failure piece is huge, right? Like, but look at racing, right? Athletes should be familiar with failure.
Yeah.
And I've run 7 marathons and I've like not done well in 5 of them. And that's a pretty decent clip. It's the same thing with pitching brands. I have a list of 60 right now, and I've heard back from a small percentage of them. And these are people that I know, let alone cold outreach. So the other piece is work your network. If you know someone at a brand, that's obviously the best step. But look at the brand, look at who they're following. See if you know any of those people. Check them out on LinkedIn. See if you know anyone that works for them, or if you're second connections or third connections. And if you can connect with somebody who can connect you and be like, hey, I've got this creative idea, or hey, I want to try something you might never have done before, you're much more likely to get a yes, or get to yes, or get a meeting that gets you to yes.
Yep.
Than just a cold outreach. Like I reached out to 10. Here's a trick. I reached out to 10 like camper trailer companies a month ago because I went camping and I wanted to go camping more, but I wanted to like pull my tent instead of set it up. And so I started finding brands on Instagram, and then I started getting ads for brands I'd never heard of. And then
cool.
I pitched them, and I got a reply, and one of them was like, yeah, we're actually just launching, and we'd trade you some demo days for feedback and content. And this is a $65,000 trailer, so I'm not buying that. And I don't need it for more than a couple of days a season. And so here is an approach to fulfilling, it's definitely not a need, but a desire, and removing a payment, going both ways. They're not going to pay me, I'm not going to pay them, for something that I want, that maybe I'd pay for, but I really don't want to pay for it. And I want to find a partnership that I can share their product or offering, and everybody wins in this scenario. So again, like, you can just find a bunch of these and then let the algorithm be your friend. And if it's like a roof rack, you'll find 10 more brands. If it's a pair of skis, you'll find 5 more brands. Like a mattress, you'll find 100 more brands. Mattresses are hot right now. So again, just like let the tools work for you, and you don't have to do a ton of research. But like, if you start looking at some specific category on the internet, you're going to get served ads from brands you've never heard of. What's interesting is these brands are all using paid marketing. And so they're all interested in paid marketing. So by default, they may be interested in ambassador or paid relationships because they already value it and they're already doing it.
That's a great point.
And so then just help them do their job.
If you see ads on Instagram, it's a proxy for, yes, we're spending money on marketing. We care.
Probably a lot of money on marketing.
Probably a lot of money. I gotta tell one story from my own personal experience to make this as real as you've described. I'd say back in January of this year, 2022, started reaching out to Gnarly Nutrition, got crickets for 3 months, reached out again after like 3 follow-ups in April. And they were like, oh, hey, sorry, just like didn't see your email. So it wasn't even that they weren't interested. They just didn't see the email. And then when they responded, they're like, you're too small. Like, reach out in like 3 more months. And I'm like, shoot. So like reached out again, said no again in June, reached out in like July and August, like, all right, let's do it. So like what I'm trying to show there is like, first they didn't see my stuff. Then they said it's not the right time. Then they said they're not interested. It took 8 months, but it ended up working. And I guess what I'm trying to say there is like, when someone says no, it also doesn't mean like no forever. It just means like no in that moment. And in other instances, like if they don't respond, I mean, they probably have a cluttered inbox. So I'm just trying to like give the listeners permission to just like be respectfully relentless.
Totally. And there are a handful of brands where I've had that experience, and I followed up quarterly And 2 years later, we have a deal.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Gnarly Nutrition is, it's funny. I have all these brands that I've talked to that have high levels of B12 that want to sponsor the podcast. Like I declined Gnarly as well, but I love what they're doing. And I love like the scholarships they're doing. I love their support of your podcast and Free Trail and so many cool athletes. Ashley Winchester is another one that they support. But yeah, like, I mean, even, yeah, with so many brands, it's like I'm doing the same thing with Strava right now, where it was a not right now, it was a no, then it was a not right now, and then it's a let's have a discussion.
Yeah.
And that's over a 9-month period. And so unless the person says like absolutely not, never contact me again and delete my email, it's total permission to, if there's a legitimate fit and opportunity and you're in the right ballpark, there's no reason. Don't do it every week. Don't do it every month. But quarterly, like, it's fine to check in. But the other piece is managing expectations, right? You can literally ask, is it okay for me to check in 3 months to see if this is if it's a better time?
Yeah.
So much so much of success is based on managing expectations. And if that person says yes, you better follow up in 3 months, because they're saying, please send me an email in 3 months. If they say no, focus your efforts elsewhere. And so I love getting to no. I like getting to yes more, but I like getting to no because it tells me stop focusing on this, stop getting excited about this, and focus elsewhere. So binary answers are your friend. Unfortunately, the majority of answers are maybe or not right now or just no response, period.
By the way, if you, the listener, are 90 minutes into this pod, A, we salute you, and B, you're probably invested in this conversation. So I'll tell you what, I know that I'll send you my deck. If you're an athlete or you're a creator and you're looking for a way to get started, I'll send you my deck, and I can commit to 3 to 5 conversations off the record with you guys about my own experience, and maybe it can help you in some capacity. Because I don't know, I feel like part of the aim for what we're doing here, right, is just helping people get educated and helping them create opportunities to carve out some space and some living in the sport, right?
I'll double that. I'll make the same offer. First 3 to 5 people, I'm happy to have that conversation with. Yeah, that's awesome.
Right on. Maybe we pivot to like just the general importance of supporting creators. I know you have strong feelings on this, so maybe talk about why it's important. And I think it's also important to contrast why you believe in it with what the alternatives are, which you think might be inferior.
Did you share publicly that you put in your 2 weeks notice?
It's on this pod. Yeah. So I actually did it today. We're recording the second part of it. We're recording it today. I just put my 2 weeks notice in today.
So here we're sitting listening to the Singletrack podcast, Run Singletrack, from Finn. Finn has bet on himself here, and you, the listener, are benefiting from it. There are brands, I believe, Gnarly, Athletic Greens, and Inside Tracker, that are currently sponsoring his podcast and are enabling him to do what he's doing and put more effort into it. They review the numbers of conversions, of reach, and they look at these metrics, and this enables them to continue sending him checks that allow him to now do this full time, right? Not every podcaster does it full time, but many do, or many aspire to, and many don't aspire to. Like, I love my job and I love podcasting, and I love them both together. But I'm also like, I have 4 people under me. I need to get paid to pay them. So the brand relationship is essential for a lot of podcasters. And so when you use discount codes, when you subscribe, when you follow the brand, when you fill out email giveaways, you're telling Finn or whoever the podcaster is that you want to support and you want to
It's a vote.
help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a vote. Yeah, it's a vote. So again, there are plenty of ways to vote without spending money. Again, rate, review, subscribe. This is incredibly important.
Huge, by the way.
And the other way to do it is vote with your dollars. And most podcasters are sharing brands that they work with, that they love, that they use, that trust them. And there's that two-way trust where the brand is trusting them to share their message and the podcaster is trusting them to help enable it to actually occur, right? So when you use that discount code of Singletrack or FTLR or whatever the code is, someone's looking at that, and by having that a return on investment substantial enough, it's a way to allow that relationship to continue. So personally, Tracksmith has been a supporter of mine since April of 2021.
Awesome brand, by the way.
Summer of 2021, which is crazy, right? They've enabled so much to happen over that period, and people are using the code, right? Like thousands of dollars have funneled, tens of thousands of dollars have funneled through that code, which they've also paired with a 5% donation to a charity that I select. So right now, like Bigger Than the Trail gets 5% of all purchases through the Tracksmith website with my code. I don't want to be like anyway. So they do these different things that incentivize people to use the code, whether it's a discount, whether it's an incentive to get a donation to go somewhere. It's all about attribution and understanding where sales are coming from. So what I was saying before is some brands are simply interested in awareness and they want to partner with big podcasts and have a lot of people learn about their brand. Other brands that potentially are just sold through the internet have a really interesting and useful ability to track attribution. So they can know that X% of their sales come from podcasters, and they know that Finn's podcast contributes X dollars per month. And so the way that this is evaluated is on an ROI basis, return on investment. So in an ideal scenario, you're spending $1, you're making more than $1, maybe $3. A 3-to-1 ratio is fantastic. For one, as Kevin from Shark Tank says, my little $1 bill is going out to fight in the world and comes back with $2 more.
I love that.
So some brands are satisfied with 0.25 to 0.5x return on investment. So they spend $1, they get 25 cents or 50 cents back. Some brands, it must be $1. Some brands, it must be $3. What's often not accounted for in that initial, let's say 30 to 60 day period is what's called the lifetime value of a customer. So if you buy a mattress, the lifetime value of a customer is probably one mattress, whatever the cost of that one mattress is, maybe a second one. So not very strong. So they rely on referral programs and whatnot, or just acquiring lots and lots and lots of new customers. It's always easier to retain a customer than it is to get a new customer. So brands with a consumable product or something that's seasonal, like apparel or supplements or food, you can look at like, okay, the value of bringing in $1 is actually $4 or $5. So it's not always about the one-to-one. It's like, okay, what is the value of this new customer? And so now we're like getting a little deeper than I think we were intending to, but this is where I spend a lot of my time at my day job, but also as a podcaster and person who's doing it on their own as well.
I'll say a couple things because I just had a really interesting cat on the podcast recently, Jack Kenzel, and he said an FKT on the Bob Graham round, took down a Kilian Jornet record, but he's got a lot of interesting thoughts on the intersection of sponsorship and athletes. And I told him, and we talk offline about this a lot because we take probably opposite views. And I think generally he takes issue with the mixing of business into running and the increasing professionalization of the sport and all the outlets around it. And I think he probably prefers this to be a hobby and to let other areas of his life provide the support for it. But I don't know, the way I see it, like life is all about trade-offs, and how much time on a weekly basis goes into, for example, the training you do or the podcast production, and how do you balance that with social and family and recreation and sleep and other work and other responsibilities? I think when people are trying to make money around their running or to make money around their podcasting, I don't think that the first what do you put it? Like the first interpretation should be, oh, they're selling out, or oh, this is just like a money grab. It's, when I think about it, and maybe it's just because I have experience now and I've gotten to talk to people like you and a lot of athletes and race directors, my first interpretation is, oh, these people are taking the necessary steps to invest more time, energy, and focus into our world so that their work is better, the content's better, their impact is bigger, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm wondering how you feel about that.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about how you allocate time, right? Like I could spend a lot more time doing my yard work, or I could take the money that I'm earning and pay someone to do that and focus on what makes me happy, and focus on like investing more time and effort into the podcast. It's the reason why I've assembled a team under me. Time is your most valuable asset, and if you ask wealthy people, they'll tell you that you don't even have to ask wealthy people. It's the thing that you can't get more of, right? You can have all the money in the world, but you cannot add more time to the day.
Yeah.
And I've seen a bunch of tweets and conversations with people like Joe Holder on Twitter where the dialogue is all about financial freedom is freedom of your schedule and being in control of your calendar. And that's what I think a lot of people aspire to.
Yeah.
And so by like having sponsors and having people that do the things that A, you're not good at, or B, you don't find fun, that's adding freedom into your day, and you can allocate that time to do things that make you happy, right? I'm in the pursuit of doing things that make me happy,
yeah,
and avoiding things that don't.
Yeah.
And that's not always possible. Like life exists, other people are important, and like you can't just be a selfish being. But if you can do things that remove stuff from your plate that you don't need to be doing, again, because you're not good at it or because it doesn't make you happy, but still needs to get done. That's where like the ability to have somebody else help you is important. I think I want to go back to you were starting to talk about this, or we were talking about the shift in sponsorship and performance versus storytelling.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people may have been listening and been thinking like, man, he's missing one key aspect of the shift in sponsorship.
Yeah.
It's association, like brands aligning with good people and people who are doing good things. And you cannot quantify that. There's value in thought leadership. There's value in supporting good people, and again, enabling them to do what they love and what makes them happy, and helps them bring more life into the world. And so there's that. I think there's a lot of that happening with we're going to have some dog barking here again. There's a lot of that happening as well, and I didn't want us to miss that aspect.
Oh no, that's huge. That's huge. Let me actually let's go back to that in 1 second, because I want to say one more thing on the previous topic. And for like the Jack Kensels of the world and anybody that does take issue with the increasing amount of money in our sport, I still think there's a good debate there. I agree, even though I take the opposite view. I think one important thing to talk about is the source of the money. So we as podcasters, we as athletes, we as event directors, race creators, etc., are we pushing products that we believe in, that we think people need and want? Or is it stuff that's wasteful? Are we driven by just the bottom line? Are we making sacrifices from like a moral and ethical standpoint? I do see the point they have there. And I know you've taken a pretty firm stance on this, saying that any product that shows up on For the Long Run, it's something you've tested, it's something that works for you, it's something you believe in. I would say the same about what I've pushed on my show, but I think that that's a fair point that they bring to the table.
Yeah, totally. And you can't trust everyone, right? And so I think that's why like cultivating a strong audience and an audience that respects you and trusts you, right? Trust is the most important aspect of this. And once you burn the trust, you've lost, and you can't really get it back. And so in the last 18 months, I've had to be incredibly particular with what I share and what I push harder than other stuff. And I don't think social media is a place for exclusively promoting things. Des Linden posted the other day, like, make Instagram again. Here's my lunch. And like and so like I post like ugly dinner photos. That's all important too. But yeah, to your point, there is no regulatory board of ethics when it comes to podcasting, and it is, or creator or event director or whatever, and it's the Wild West. And there's like Karen and I were talking this morning about a brand that came on strong in the endurance space, started sponsoring a bunch of athletes, and it was a supplement that didn't have an NSF approval. And nobody's had any problems. They have plenty of, regulatory or internal testing and batch testing, et cetera. But she was like, for me, my moral compass and everything I stand for says I must protect clean sport. Coming from her, where like she's been robbed of opportunity from not clean sport, that was a threshold she was not willing to cross. And so everyone has their line, and that for her, that was the line that she would not cross. And she was like, yeah, the paycheck would have been nice, but I can't do it. And I think all of us have, at least in some capacity, like a moral compass, or hopefully, and that's what drives us. But then there are people out there that every December or January is such an interesting time, because you see these shifts in shoe sponsors, and you see athletes that are like, oh man, I love, I'm so excited to represent XYZ new brand because their carbon plate's better than everyone else's and their recovery shoe is the best. And my easy runs have gotten so much better. And like, I can't stand that period. I understand why it exists, and I understand why these posts happen. But every time I see it, I'm like, man, how has nobody called bullshit on this?
I want to come back to what we were talking about in the changing athlete-sponsor relationship. And I'll make a pretty strong statement. Nothing, or very few things in the running world make me more mad than when an athlete laments that everything is changing and that they're not being directly rewarded for performance anymore, and that they have to be active on social media. And for right or wrong, I don't know where it comes from, but they have this idea that if they start working with a brand, they have to like put out these cookie cutter posts that aren't themselves, and that just by virtue of the changing nature of the relationship, they have to be this like content robot. And I think we should try to dispel that here, because at least the contracts that I've had a chance to look at, and in the conversations I've had, athletes have a lot of creative freedom to portray themselves on social media and to work with these brands. So I'm curious what you think there.
So speaking from personal experience, I've worked with agents and brands and athletes. So again, we're on both sides of the coin here. who have outlined very specific deliverables, and it didn't work. And once the reins were pulled back and a little creative freedom, creative liberty was given, the partnership thrived. I think there's a lot to. I did a podcast with a guy named Phil Gaiman. He's a ex-professional cyclist who's doing better today from a monetary perspective than he ever was as a professional cyclist. He said he was getting paid $2,000 a year by Jelly Belly, not $2,000 a month, $2,000 a year. And now I've signed contracts with him that are similar sized. And to use him as an example, we worked with him and had very specific requests, and it didn't work. And he said, "Look, man, I've been doing this for a long time. I know my audience. Don't let me be this cookie cutter person because it's not going to work, and this is not going to be a long-term relationship." We said, "Fine." Pull back on the approach, and he does his thing, and it works. And so I think it's all about the individual. So some people need hand-holding, and they need curation by an expert. And other people know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what to, they know exactly how to speak to their audience. I take a middle of the road approach where, like, my relationship with Previnex, they know how to speak to their customers. They're a supplement brand, born out of the CEO's background of clinical research and basically understanding how the supplement industry worked, and using his knowledge to put out better supplements and focus on quality. So he knows what resonates with his customers, and I know what resonates with my audience, and we blend that together. And the message is evidence-based and personalized. Something like Tracksmith, they tell me the clothes they want to focus on, and I apply my knowledge of how the seasons work and how sweating happens, and tailor, pun intended, the discussion about the apparel to that. And then there are people that are just like, tell me what to do, and their audience is used to that, and it works. And then there are people like Phil, like plenty of other people who are experts. They've been in this for a long enough time that if somebody tells them what to do, they're going to push back, and they're going to say, I need the creative liberty. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. So again, if you're an athlete listening to this, be open and honest with the brand. Talk to them about your style and ask them how it's best to work together. Do you have specific messaging that you need to get across, or is it more about association and experiential? Now, most brands will have like brand guidelines or things that like you can't ever say, or like claims that can't be made, or like the brand is one word, and like, please don't put a space in between. But outside of that, like, do your thing, talk about it however you want. And my favorite athlete to work with is the athlete that you show the end zone or the finish line, to use a running analogy, and they figure out the route to get there. Those are the people that honestly do best because it's less management of the athlete or creator and more goal oriented, and the process is up to them to figure out, which is fun.
I agree. And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong here when I say this, but my understanding is that, at least in the context of running sponsorships, one of the major reasons why performances translated into sponsorship until very recently is because marketers and brands and anybody that was investing money into the sport lacked the tools of social media and measurement that we have now in order to focus on things that we couldn't measure in the past, like storytelling and the audiences that you build via Instagram and Twitter and email. And that's part of why the shift has been enabled, and it's more of like a meritocracy where you don't have to win a race to be successful. You can be someone that's outspoken and has good messages to share. And to me, that makes sense because, and I'll say this, and it's kind of crass, but like, how does you winning a race on its own, like not including other things, how does that help the brand? How does that help other people? How does that on its own resonate? There's just so many other factors that go in.
It used to be because it sold shoes.
Yeah.
And everyone wanted the Nikes that XYZ athlete wore to win whatever race it is. And now people are craving connection and craving emotion in their purchasing, and like they feel some loyalty and they feel something. And it's the, like, you'll never meet the majority of the athletes that you see on social media, but you want to like be like them, or you want to this is more so how it used to be, where like you wanted to it's the like Michael Jordan in the jumping, like you want to be like Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now it's the, well, I want to be like Keely, who had a tough injury and has grown a ton, and I want to grow a ton, and she hasn't done it again yet, but she's going to, and I want to be there with her, or support the brands that support her, and use the ultra running shoes, and Goo or whatever it is. And the people are truly fans of, so similar to how like you wear a Boston Red Sox hat, there's like pride. Ever since moving to Boulder, like Scratch is the fuel that people in Boulder use, Scratch and Spring. And it's like it's like a cult following, because it's like it's a local brand and people love it. And like I've been in their office a handful of times, and like I really just want to support those people because they're awesome and they're doing it for the right reasons. And so there's some sense of like pride in tagging them on Instagram, or seeing the kit with the super fuel, or like whatever it is. And people are craving this connection. And so like the association with the brand is, or the association with the athlete is like the bridge to the brand. And so to go back to your question,
let me say one thing about Keely, because I think this is a great example. She has a partnership with your company, Inside Tracker, and the way she publishes those Instagram posts that mention your brand and her use of the products, I think is a great example here. She's incredibly generous with her audience about why she uses the product, how she uses the product, and then how she applies all of the takeaways from the results of like the lab test, for example, to her own training. And when you read it, you don't feel like she's sold out. You don't feel like this is all forced upon her. You feel truly like this is an essential part of her daily training regimen and how she improves as an athlete. Incredibly authentic and incredibly generous. Like you feel like you've picked up learnings for your own stuff along the way.
And that's the goal. And so, fun story about Keely. She purchased Inside Tracker on her own in 2015 with like a Black Friday discount, and then was connected to us again by our relationship with Goo. And so Goo sponsored their pro athletes to use Inside Tracker for like 3 years. Actually, they're still doing it. So that was, oh my God, 7 years ago. Holy crap. I said 3. Wow, that was 7 years ago. And at the time, Keely was working at Nike, and she had a full-time job and also a small contract with Nike. And over the years, she had been telling me about her desire to quit her job and be a full-time athlete and go back to school. And so as we grew, I said, we will support you financially when we can. And in the meantime, thank you for sharing the way you're sharing. This is amazing. We'll continue to support you with product, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we had a conversation a couple of years ago at this point, and she's like, I think I'm going to do it. Can we work together formally on this? So we sponsored her podcast, and we have like an individual ambassador paid partnership with her. And that plus her other partnerships allowed her to quit her job.
Yeah.
And
so cool.
And so I'm so proud of that experience. I've been at Inside Tracker since 2014, and it took a lot to get where we are today. And I always gave my word that when we could pay people, we would pay the ones first who helped us get to where we were. So for a handful of years, it was like in-kind trade with athletes who truly believed in the mission and felt value and an association with the brand and with the mission of the brand, which is do what you love for longer. So for an athlete, they're using the platform because it's something that's critical to their health and performance and longevity in the sport, which allows them to pay their bills. And for me, it was like so validating and fulfilling that we kept up on our end of the bargain, and we sponsored dozens of athletes now in a paid capacity.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that made me the most proud of my entire career was last Black Friday, where say what you will about Black Friday, but discount codes galore.
Right.
But what was so cool about what we were able to do was we asked people to share a story about something related to Inside Tracker. So you may have seen 100 different posts, but every single one was different, and every single one told a story. And what happened was people probably saw 10 different posts, between 10 and 40 different posts, and related to a couple of them. They saw themselves in Keely, who was under fueling and had super low iron. They saw themselves in Shalane, who had high cholesterol, as someone who's like conventionally looks healthy, right?
Yeah.
And had work to do. And so they're like, if these athletes who are at the top of their sport are experiencing this, well, maybe I am too, and maybe I can improve. And so it's like bringing these people who are so elite, I don't want to say down to earth, but like to make them relatable through storytelling and through like deeply personal, like sharing I have low testosterone or these types of things.
Yeah.
And again, I was so proud just like scrolling through Instagram and seeing all that stuff. And so that's the epitome of everything we've been talking about, where it's linking a feeling, an emotion, a relatability to someone that you respect and trust, and learning from a brand, and then to bring it full circle, maybe purchasing and showing that it all works. And I'm so fortunate that like a conversion for us like tangibly means we're going to help somebody with their health, right? It's not like selling another box or piece of wood or like light bulb. It's like functionally going to help and improve your life. And so for me, it's so exciting that like that's what the outcome is. And it's also how I try and align with brands, where like Freedom Solar, it's all about environmentalism and saving money and feeling good about your consumption. With Previnex, it's creating health. With Tracksmith, it's like feeling good. It's not chafing. It's like looking awesome when you're doing it. With Gooder, it's these glasses. I can't believe that every single person in Boulder wears Gooders. It's like, and that's tribal, right? I feel a part of something because of that. I declined Gooder 4 times and they kept coming back. And funny story on that one was my friends I was wearing these Oakleys, and they're just like super intense. And I was like wearing them to like a beer garden. And my college friends were making fun of me every single time they saw a post about it. And it just so happens that one of the days that Gooder reached out was a day that I posted a photo in these Oakleys, which were like bright orange. And my college friends like tore me a new one. I was like, Okay, fine. Yes. And they've been sponsoring the podcast since March of 2021 as well. And then here I am in Boulder and every single person wears them. And it's just like this association or thing that connects people. As silly as it sounds, like try and tell me you don't feel like something when you pass someone on the street and there's something similar about the two of you, whether it's an article of clothing, whether it's the shoes you're wearing, like everyone craves connection, and brands are creating that.
I interrupted you earlier when I mentioned the Keely story. Do you remember what you were going to say?
I have no idea.
I apologize for that, but hey, shout out to Keely. Like I said, I truly believe it. If there's a aspiring pro athlete or a pro athlete that's listening, and you're looking for a great case study in someone who is doing sponsored posts well, anytime I read Keely's content, I feel like, well, I know it's just genuine and it's helpful and it's generous. So,
well, it's incredibly intentional, right? I had this conversation with her, I don't know, ahead of Black Friday 2018. She's like, I'll never work with more than a handful of brands, and I'll never work with brands that I don't love the people, the mission, and the products. And I think that if everyone could, I don't know, abide by that little trio of check boxes, we'd phase out all the crap, and the good stuff would rise to the top, and people would be supported and appreciated and whatnot. But again, to give Keely more kudos, what an incredible athlete, storyteller, science communicator, and podcast host.
Yep.
Have we gone 2 hours? This is crazy.
Yeah, we're at 2 hours. I think we're over. Well, I think we passed 2 hours about 15 minutes ago. I'm trying to think here. A couple more things I want to ask you. Besides the non-endemic stuff and maybe just the changing expectations from potential sponsors for shows like ours, do you see anything else as part of the next evolution in the running media space coming down?
Yeah, everything is content and storytelling, and leveraging user-generated content, leveraging stories, leveraging. I was listening to Peter Abraham on the Free Trail podcast.
Yeah, good episode.
And they were talking about this as well. And like we just published or we're going to publish a Hood to Coast video. This is a 20-minute video with Joe Holder and a team that he ran Hood to Coast with. And I texted my coworker. I was like, man, this is so captivating. And the brand, Is This Tracker brand, didn't have a huge role in the piece, but it's part of the relationship. It's part of the whole story and what connects us to these people. Dylan and a handful of other people are basically curating these mini documentaries with athletes. He did one with Tim Tollefson up to Western States, and this kind of stuff. I think this is the future. I think it's like a brand outsourcing media creation and content creation to some sort, not an agency, but like a video guy or a photographer. Like we've done a lot of work with Courtney White through Bowerman Track Club and Shalane Flanagan. And Courtney's team is so fantastic at like captivating and like getting the true story. And it's because of the trust between the videographer and like talent is a crude way to put it, but talent, Shalane. And when we first started publishing this stuff, people who are like pretty veteran in the space were like, man, I saw a side of her that I'd never seen before. And it was because she was playing with her baby Jack and like being a human who just so happened to be an Olympian and New York City Marathon winner and blah, blah, blah. But that's the thing. Like we are craving these like inside looks at what makes someone tick. And the brands that can tie that back to their fundamental mission, they're going to win.
Yep.
And just like consuming or watching these videos and understanding how to link like a captivating video back to the brand mission, that's the future. One other thing, again, I was talking about this with Kara this morning, that we see shifting is broadcasting. And so look at Western States, look at UTMB, look at what Sidious is doing with track and field. Sidious had like a recovery zone sponsored by UFOS at Eugene at the World Championships. And so they would literally pull people off the track, sit them down, probably in a hyperice chair, and put UFOs on them.
Brilliant.
and talk about their race, sort of like Monday morning armchair quarterbacking. And this is so captivating, and we need to figure out ways to do more of this. And so Kara was thinking, like, how do I get NBC to do it, or how do I get somebody to do it for marathoning or track and field or whatnot? But look at what Western States is doing with 30 hours of coverage. Look at UTMB with, like, if UTMB can do it, 107 miles around Mont Blanc in the middle of the Alps, we can do this at tracks. We can do this at major road marathons. We can do this anywhere. If you can run along Killian and Jim and Courtney and like get up in their face with a camera, and that's fine apparently, and like watch how things unfold and then talk about it, and then tie in sponsors who are funding the ability to do this kind of stuff, but like making it so core to what they're doing. The UFOs thing was brilliant, where, hey, put on the recovery slides. It's so smart, but it's also so simple. Oh, it's sunny out here. Put on these, but like that's the future. The future is like truly emerged. Anyway, like really in it. And so core to the offering of that brand. That's the association that makes sense. That's the association that allows brands to invest behind it, and that's what allows creators and athletes and broadcasts to exist.
I want to reinforce what you said there about brands outsourcing media and storytelling creation to these companies like Freetrail. I think I couldn't agree more. I think it's part of the future, and my mind starts to spin for all the people that are out there with those skills, with those video skills, with those writing skills, with those podcasting skills, who can recognize a story in their community, recognize maybe the formation of a group or a community, and say, hey, there's something here, and pitching it to a brand, and not just doing it for like their own career's sake, but knowing that they're going to create something that's probably pretty evergreen, and it's going to have a huge impact on just distribution of the sport beyond hardcore fans.
Totally. And then there are so many people doing such a good job of it. My buddy Tony DiPasquale has been doing it. I
just met him, by the way.
With Hoka. He's incredible, right?
Yeah.
So I know
Tony
him
with
from
Sony.
Like Tony with a Sony. We ran rim to rim to rim together, and he ran south to north with the Sony, and he ditched it with our friends at the North Rim. He's doing it. He's working with a lot of people in the Bay Area. Kenny Withrow out here in Boulder is Miranda Carfrey.
Can I say one thing about Tony? So
yeah,
I met him out in Chamonix for UTMB, and he was on a contract with Rabbit, and he was filming my friend Jimmy Elam, who was racing UTMB. And I remember the very next day, Tony publishes this reel. It's, for lack of a better phrase, fucking sick. It was awesome. Like, he crushed it. And I remember Jimmy's other sponsor, Ultra, one of their reps was there, and he looks over Tony's shoulder and he's like, is there any way we can get our hands on that? Like a copy of that? So just amazing. That's a great example of like spontaneous, serendipitous business development, and how like if you build it, all of these other people will become interested and they'll come. And he's a super talented creator, but that was one of the lasting memories I have from Chamonix. Is like this guy like kind of self-funded his trip over there, and he was chasing Jimmy around the mountain and getting these impossible shots at like 4 a.m. as the sunrise was happening, or in Triant, and he he does what he's supposed to do for Rabbit, but then there's like 3 more brands that are like, what you just did is sick. And like, we're on board. Like, how do we get what you're creating?
Yeah, totally. I love that. I mean, talk about people who have taken a leap. Tony was a software developer, making the big bucks. And now he is doing photo and video for outdoor and adventure brands, making significantly less than he was, but is super happy. And that's what I think we should all aspire to be, right? Like, chase what makes you happy and do more of that. And like, he bet on himself and it's working. And it's really cool to see it. He's a good friend of mine, so it's really cool to hear that story and be able to talk about him. I'm gonna have to tell him he's gonna have to listen to 2.5 hours of this podcast to hear the shout out. But yeah, that's it. That's what I'm talking about.
Awesome.
And then supporting people like him by investing in the storytelling, and brands need people like him to create the storytelling. So it's this like perfect symbiotic relationship where, again, 1 + 1 = 3. That's what we should all be chasing. How do we all win? How do we all make each other better? How do we all help everyone else by helping each other? Because we all win. Rising tide lifts all ships.
There's this great quote in the tech world: build once, sell twice. It's all about like the marginal costs of software development and stuff, but it applies to content too. It's efficiency. Yeah. And so
copy paste.
Exactly. All right. Maybe we start to close up here with a couple final future focused questions as it pertains to your podcast For the Long Run and your involvement in the media side of our sport. What's next for you? And maybe to narrow that down, it's like in the next year or so, what are some projects or conversations or just anything with the pod that particularly excites you?
I sent, so my, I don't know what to call her, like saving grace or hero or whatever, but Emily, who helps with the podcast, was just, helps is doing a lot of work in that, in that sentence. She's managing me at this point. She was just climbing Kilimanjaro and she got back a couple days ago and I sent her some notes. And in the notes, I said, YouTube, a few other things, YouTube, a few other things, and YouTube. So she's like, oh, you want to talk about YouTube, huh? So the goal is to get on YouTube. I hate being on video. I hate like recording myself. But I understand how, again, we talked about it. YouTube is the second largest search engine.
Yeah, it's huge.
And it's how things are growing. So I want to get on YouTube. I want to continue to invest behind the podcast and in the team. I don't even want to do more. I just want like more doers on the team. I'd be remiss to not mention Ruby Wiles, who is a collegiate athlete who helps with the show notes and pulling quotes and guest management and so many other things. Brian Walters, who is of Singletrack Sound. So this is eventually he'll get the Run Singletrack audio. He is the audio engineer. He produced the intro music to the podcast. So I'm so grateful for him. And then Tony with a Sony built my website.
Awesome.
And we've shared a ton of miles together. So I want to keep investing. And Emily Holland, I want to keep investing in these people. I want to keep, and Angie Marie is on the social team. It's like so crazy I can talk about like this of this many people. I want her to do more. I want to just build. I don't have goals. I'm just curious. I want to see how far it can go. I want to see how many millions of downloads we can get. I want to see. I want a 500% ROI, and then grow that partnership. If I saw 500% ROI, that's undervaluing. But anyway, we're somewhere close there with Freedom Solar. But anyway. Yeah, I'm just curious. I want to keep growing it. I want to see where it can go, but I want to just have awesome conversations with really interesting people and help people learn about how to be better and how to live better and how to navigate the times that aren't so awesome. And I feel I'm doing that. So I just want to do more of it.
I know that, I should say with the caveat that you are extremely satisfied and fulfilled working at Inside Tracker. If we fast forward 5 or 10 years down the road, is there a possibility that you could be a full-time creator / entrepreneur at that point?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm so invested in Inside Tracker from being there since the beginning, effectively, that like I love what I do. I'm very happy there. I'm challenged. I'm being challenged more than ever before, and I'm learning from the people above me. And as long as that's the situation, I think if you're in a place where you're satisfied but not hungry, that's a sign that it's time for a change. But if you're satisfied and hungry, or happy and hungry, that's a good place to be. And that's where I am with both Inside Tracker and the podcast. And if I can remain happy and hungry in both of those mediums, I'm winning, right? Like, how does it get better than that from a professional standpoint? I don't think it does. And so I'm incredibly grateful that I'm in this position where I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm able to support others and feel like people are truly invested in me. Like, I can't make any changes in that situation. But it comes down to like, I'm never satisfied. I'm never truly satisfied. And that's a, as you said, that's a feature, not a bug. That's why I believe the podcast has grown to where it is. That's why Inside Tracker has grown to where it is, because status quo is my enemy, and I hate being bored. And so that's my North Star. Just like, stay hungry, stay happy, and support the people who make it possible.
Amen. Well, I've learned a ton in this conversation. I for sure appreciate you being in the space, creating, adding to the conversation, adding to the audio space in our sport, and more.
And video soon.
Yeah, we'll make sure to link to For the Long Run podcast. It's a great show in the show notes. We'll link to all your other relevant socials as well. I always give the guest free reign here at the end. Are there any calls to action you have, or are there any other parting thoughts you have before we sign off?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. The call to action, if you haven't run yet today, think about why you're excited to go for a run. If you're currently running, you're on quite a long run, because we've gone 2.5 hours. So kudos to you. And if you've already run today, be grateful that you can.
Perfect. Jon, thanks again. And I'm sure this is just round one of a whole slew of future conversations.
Cool. What are you doing tomorrow at 5 p.m.? I'm just kidding. Finn, thank you so much. Thank you for all you do, for your passion for the sport and growing the sport, and also attempting to disrupt status quo. It's very much appreciated. I've had a ton of conversations with people who are high up, pro athletes, etc., and they all truly and deeply respect what you're doing in this space. So keep doing it, and congrats on taking a big step today. Next up in the series of listener-submitted questions is, what shoes should I wear? The easy answer to this one is go to a local running store and ask them. If they give you a recommendation without seeing you run, go to a different running store. Outside of that, that's what you should do. Jokes aside though, but I'm really not joking on that. Please go to a running store and do that. Outside of that, there are a couple of shoes that are pretty well tolerated by most people. And I say most. The Nike Pegasus and the Brooks Launch. Those are pretty widely worn by people with different types of foot strikes and whatnot. I run in the Brooks Launch. I also recommend switching up the shoes that you wear on a regular basis. So I wear a couple of pairs of Nikes, a couple of pairs of Brooks, and a couple pairs of Hoka on a pretty regular basis. Switching up the shoe you're wearing first for the type of run you're doing, but also just in general, is a really good way to help reduce injury risk as well as the wear and tear on the shoes. They actually last longer if you rotate them around. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Singletrack Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.